Jake Morrison pushed his cleaning cart down the long hallway of the Pentagon. The wheels squeaked softly on the polished marble floor. It was past midnight, and the building was almost empty. This was how Jake liked it. Quiet, peaceful, nobody bothering him. He had been cleaning these same halls for 15 years. Every night he came to work at 11 and left at 7 in the morning. He knew every corner, every office, every hidden room in this massive building. The Pentagon was like a second home to him now. Jake stopped at the first office on his list. He knocked gently on the door, waited a moment, then used his key to enter. The office belonged to some important person whose name Jake never bothered to remember. Important people came and went, but Jake stayed. He was invisible to them, and that was fine with him. He emptied the trash can and wiped down the desk. The computer was still on, showing a screensaver of flying stars. Jake had learned long ago not to look at the papers on these desks. Not his business. Not his problem. His supervisor, Linda Carter, appeared in the doorway. She was a thin woman, with gray hair, who always looked angry about something. Tonight was no different. "Jake, you missed a spot in the bathroom on the 3rd floor yesterday," she said, not looking at him. "Make sure you get it tonight." "Yes, ma'am," Jake replied quietly. He kept his head down and continued cleaning. Linda stood there for a moment, probably trying to think of something else to complain about. When she could not find anything, she walked away without another word. Jake finished the office and moved to the next one. This was his life now. Simple, safe. Nobody expected anything from him except clean floors and empty trash cans. He could do this job in his sleep. As he cleaned, Jake thought about his small apartment across town. It was not much, but it was his. A one-bedroom place with a kitchen barely big enough for one person. He had an old couch, a television that worked most of the time, and a bed that was too soft. But it was quiet, and quiet was what Jake needed most. He had no friends to speak of, no family that stayed in touch, no girlfriend or wife. Just work and home, home and work. Some people might call it lonely, but Jake called it peaceful. The clock on the wall showed 2:30 a.m. when Jake reached the executive level. This floor was different from the others. The offices were bigger, the furniture more expensive, the security tighter. Jake had special clearance to clean up here, though he never understood why they trusted a janitor with access to such important places. He was cleaning near the main conference room when he heard voices inside. This was unusual. Most people were long gone by this time of night. Jake paused, holding his mop still. He should move on, mind his own business like always, but something about the voices made him stop. They sounded worried, maybe even scared. In all his years here, Jake had never heard important people sound scared. He moved closer to the door. It was slightly open, just a crack. Jake knew he should not listen, but his feet would not move away. The message came through again, an hour. "Go," a man's voice said. "They are serious about this." "How can they be serious about something that does not exist?" A woman replied. Her voice was sharp, frustrated. "We have looked everywhere, every database, every file, every record. There is no trace of anyone called the Ghost of Kandahar." Jake's blood turned to ice. His hands started shaking so badly. He had to grip the mop handle tight to keep it from falling. "The aliens are not going to wait much longer," another voice said. "They want to meet with this person, or they walk away. And if they walk away—" "We know what happens if they walk away," the woman interrupted. "Earth stays alone. No protection from the other species out there. No technology. No help when the really dangerous ones show up." Jake's mind was spinning. Aliens? Other species? What were they talking about? "Tell me again what the message said," the first man spoke. The Dominion Coalition wishes to meet with the human known as the Ghost of Kandahar. Someone read from what sounded like a paper. They say this person represents the finest example of human military thinking. They will not negotiate with anyone else. But the ghost is a myth, another person said. A story soldiers tell. Nobody with that name ever existed. The aliens seem to think otherwise, the woman replied. They have detailed knowledge of operations that officially never happened. Battles in places we have never admitted to fighting. They know things that are classified so far above our heads we cannot even see them. Jake leaned against the wall. His heart was beating so fast he thought it might explode. They were talking about him. After 20 years of hiding, after 20 years of being invisible, they were looking for him. What about the records from Afghanistan? Someone asked. The special operations files? Sealed. Everything from that time period is locked down tight. We do not have the clearance to open them. Then we need to find someone who does. Jake heard chairs moving, like people were getting ready to leave. He quickly grabbed his cart and moved away from the door, trying to look like he had been cleaning the whole time. But his hands were still shaking. His whole body was shaking. The Ghost of Kandahar. He had not heard that name in 20 years. Had tried to forget it ever existed. Had buried it so deep, he sometimes convinced himself it had all been a dream. But it had not been a dream. None of it had been a dream. Jake finished his cleaning in a daze. He moved through the rest of his shift like a robot, going through the motions but not really thinking about what he was doing. His mind was stuck 20 years in the past, in a desert far from here, in a life that seemed like it had belonged to someone else. When 7 o'clock came, Jake clocked out and walked to his old truck in the parking lot. He sat behind the wheel for a long time, staring at nothing. The aliens wanted to meet the Ghost of Kandahar. They thought this person was some kind of hero, some example of the best humanity had to offer. If only they knew the truth. If only they knew that the Ghost of Kandahar was just a broken man who pushed a mop for a living. A man who had run away from everything and everyone. A man who had spent 20 years trying to forget who he used to be. Jake started the truck and drove home through the empty streets. The sun was coming up, painting the sky pink and orange. It was going to be a beautiful day. But Jake Morrison, the invisible janitor, knew that his quiet life was about to end. The past had found him, and there was nowhere left to run. General Patricia Hayes walked through the Pentagon halls with quick, sharp steps. Behind her followed Captain Steve Rodriguez and Lieutenant Amy Foster. All three looked tired and frustrated. They had been searching for 3 days now, and they were no closer to finding the Ghost of Kandahar than when they started. "Run it by me again," General Hayes said as they walked. "What exactly do we know?" Captain Rodriguez looked at his tablet. "The aliens sent another message this morning. They are getting impatient. They want to meet the ghost in person within 72 hours, or they leave." "And if they leave?" Lieutenant Foster asked, though she already knew the answer. "Earth stays alone," General Hayes replied. "No protection from the Dominion Coalition. No advanced technology. No help when the hostile species decide to visit." They reached the conference room and sat down at the long table. The room was secure, swept for bugs twice a day. Everything they discussed here was classified at the highest levels. "What about the old files?" General Hayes asked. "Anything new?" "Dead end," Captain Rodriguez said. "Every file about the ghost has been sealed. The few people who might have worked with him are either dead or refuse to talk. It is like this person never existed." "But the aliens know he existed," Lieutenant Foster pointed out. "They have details about operations that are not in any of our records. How is that possible?" General Hayes rubbed her temples. She had been in the military for 30 years. had seen 3 wars and dozens of smaller conflicts. But nothing had prepared her for this. First contact with alien species should have been the greatest moment in human history. Instead, it was. Turning into a nightmare. Maybe the ghost does not want to be found, she said quietly. What do you mean? Captain Rodriguez asked. Think about it. Someone with his skills, his knowledge, just disappears? Maybe it was not an accident. Maybe he had a good reason to vanish. Meanwhile, Jake Morrison was having the worst week of his life. He had barely slept since hearing that conversation. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw faces from 20 years ago, friends who had died, enemies he had killed, a life he had tried so hard to forget. He was cleaning the executive floor again when he noticed the increased security. More guards, more cameras, more people checking identification. Something big was happening. Jake kept his head down and did his job, but he was listening, always listening. He heard bits and pieces of conversation as people walked by. Still no luck finding him. The aliens are getting angry. Maybe he is dead. Maybe he never existed. Jake almost smiled at that last one. If only it were true God, he was emptying trash cans near the main conference room when Captain Rodriguez appeared. The man was young, maybe 35, with dark hair and sharp eyes. Eyes that seemed to see everything. Excuse me, Captain Rodriguez said. You are Jake Morrison, right? The night janitor? Jake's heart skipped a beat, but he kept his face blank. Yes, sir. Is there a problem with my work? No, no problem. Captain Rodriguez studied him carefully. How long have you worked here? 15 years, sir. That is a long time. You must know this building pretty well. I guess so, sir. Is there something I can help you with? Captain Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. Jake could feel those sharp eyes looking right through him. You ever hear any interesting conversations while you work? The captain asked. People sometimes forget that cleaning staff have ears. Jake shrugged. I try not to listen, sir. Not my business. Right, of course. Captain Rodriguez paused. You ever hear of someone called the Ghost of Kandahar? Jake's blood turned cold, but he managed to keep his voice steady. No, sir. Sounds like something from a movie. Captain Rodriguez nodded slowly. Yeah, that is what I thought too. He started to walk away, then stopped. Jake, if you ever do hear anything interesting, you let me know, okay? It could be very important. Yes, sir, Jake replied. After Captain Rodriguez left, Jake had to sit down. His legs were shaking so badly he could barely stand. 20 years of hiding, and now they were getting close. Not close enough to figure it out yet, but close enough to make him nervous. That night, Jake went home and stared at his closet for a long time. In the back, behind old coats and boxes of junk, was a small metal box. He had not opened it in 10 years. Had tried to pretend it did not exist, but now he pulled it out and set it on his kitchen table. Inside the box were things from his old life. Dog tags with a different name, medals he had never wanted to keep, a photograph of 12 men in desert uniforms, all smiling at the camera. Jake was in the middle, younger and thinner, but still recognizable. At the bottom of the box was a letter. Official military stationery, signed by people whose names were now classified. It explained his new identity, his new life. It thanked him for his service and wished him well in his retirement at 35 years old, because he had broken down completely after his last mission, because he could not handle being the ghost anymore. Jake put everything back in the box and shoved it into the closet again. The next morning, he was cleaning near the executive offices when he heard raised voices from the conference room. The door was closed this time, but the walls were thin. 48 hours, someone was saying. That is all we have left. We have searched everywhere, General Hayes's voice replied. This person does not exist in any current database. Then we need to look at the old databases, another voice said. The classified ones. We do not have clearance for those. Then we get clearance. From who? Anyone with that level of access is either dead or retired. Jake stopped cleaning and listened harder. What about the people who worked with the ghost? Lieutenant Foster's voice asked. Even if the files are sealed, someone has to remember something. We tried that, Captain Rodriguez replied. Every name we found either died in combat or disappeared after the wars ended. It is like they all just vanished. Or were made to vanish, General Hayes said quietly. There was silence for a moment. You think this was deliberate? Someone asked. I think the ghost and everyone who worked with him were given new identities and new lives. Deep cover. So deep that even we cannot find them. But why? Because something went wrong. Something bad enough that they had to erase these people from history. Jake's hands were shaking again. They were getting close to the truth. Too close. That afternoon, Linda Carter found him in a supply closet, just sitting on a box and staring at nothing. Jake, what is wrong with you this week? She asked. You have been acting strange. Sorry, ma'am. Just tired. Well, get untired. There are important people asking questions about the cleaning staff. I do not need any problems. What kind of questions? How long people have worked here? Whether they can be trusted? That sort of thing. Linda looked at him suspiciously. You have not done anything stupid, have you? No, ma'am. But as Linda walked away, Jake knew his time was running out. They were checking on the cleaning staff now. How long before they put the pieces together? That night, as Jake finished his shift, he made a decision. He could not run anymore. The aliens wanted to meet the ghost of Kandahar, and they were not going to give up until they found him. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Maybe it was time to face the past he had spent 20 years trying to forget. But first, he needed to remember how to be someone other than Jake Morrison, the invisible janitor. He needed to remember how to be the ghost. Jake Morrison stood outside the secure conference room at 6 a.m. His shift was over, but he had not gone home. Instead, he had spent the last hour walking the halls, trying to find the courage to knock on that door dot inside. He could hear voices. General Hayes and her team were working early, probably desperate to find the ghost before time ran out. They had 24 hours left before the aliens gave up on humanity. Jake raised his hand to knock, then stopped. Once he opened that door, there would be no going back. No more quiet life. No more being invisible. But if he did nothing, Earth would be left alone in a dangerous universe. And despite everything that had happened, despite all the pain and guilt he carried, Jake could not let that happen. He knocked. The voices inside stopped. Footsteps approached the door. Captain Rodriguez opened it, looking surprised to see the night janitor standing there. Jake, what are you doing here? Your shift ended an hour ago. I need to speak with General Hayes, Jake said quietly. It is about the ghost of Kandahar. Captain Rodriguez's eyes went wide. What do you know about the ghost? Everything. 5 minutes later, Jake sat at the conference table facing General Hayes, Captain Rodriguez, and Lieutenant Foster. They all stared at him like he was some kind of puzzle they could not solve. Start from the beginning, General Hayes said. Her voice was calm, but Jake could see the tension in her eyes. Jake took a deep breath. My real name is Colonel Jacob Morrison. 20 years ago, I was the commanding officer of Special Operations Unit 7. I was the ghost of Kandahar. The room went completely silent. Lieutenant Foster's mouth fell open. Captain Rodriguez leaned forward in his chair. That is impossible, General Hayes said. The ghost was a legendary figure. You are a janitor. I have been a janitor for 15 years, Jake replied. Before that, I was something else. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his dog tags, the ones from the metal box in his closet. He set them on the table. General Hayes picked them up and read them. Her face went pale. Colonel Jacob Morrison, Special Operations Command. She looked up at Jake. These could be fake. They are not fake. Jake pulled out the photograph of his unit. 12 men in desert uniforms, all smiling. He pointed to himself in the center. That is me. Those are my men. All dead now except for me. Captain Rodriguez grabbed the photo and studied it carefully. When was this taken? 2 months before my last mission. Before everything went wrong. Lieutenant Foster had pulled out her tablet and was typing rapidly. There are no records of a Colonel Jacob Morrison in Special Operations. The records were sealed, Jake said, along with everything else about my unit and our missions. Why? General Hayes asked. Jake was quiet for a long moment. The memories were coming back now, whether he wanted them or not. Desert sand, gunfire, the smell of blood and explosives. Because of what happened in Kandahar, he said finally. My last mission. Tell us, General Hayes ordered. Jake closed his eyes. We were sent to rescue 12 hostages from a terrorist compound. Intelligence said there were maybe 20 enemies. Easy job for my unit. He opened his eyes and looked at each of them. Intelligence was wrong. There were not 20. There were 200, and they knew we were coming. The room was so quiet Jake could hear the air conditioning humming. We got the hostages out, he continued. But we walked into a trap. My entire unit was killed. All 11 of my men. I was the only one who made it back. That does not make you a failure, General Hayes said gently. Missions go wrong. Good soldiers die. That is the reality of war. Jake shook his head. You do not understand. I led them into that trap. I made the call to go in. I got them killed. Based on the intelligence you were given, Captain Rodriguez pointed out. It does not matter. They trusted me, and I failed them. Jake's voice was getting quieter. After that, I could not do it anymore. Could not make decisions that got people killed. I had a complete breakdown. Lieutenant Foster was still searching her tablet. I found something. A classified after-action report from Afghanistan. It is heavily redacted, but it mentions a Colonel Morrison and a failed rescue mission. What else does it say? General Hayes asked. That is the strange part. The mission is listed as a failure, but Colonel Morrison is recommended for the Medal of Honor. It says he single-handedly held off 200 enemy fighters while evacuating 12 hostages and the bodies of his fallen unit. Jake laughed bitterly. They wanted to give me a medal for getting my friends killed. You saved 12 innocent people, General Hayes said. And you brought your men home, even the dead ones. That matters. Not to me. Captain Rodriguez was looking at more files on his tablet. There are other reports here, dozens of them. Operations all over the world. Some of these missions sound impossible. Nothing was impossible for my unit, Jake said. We were the best. According to this, you once infiltrated an enemy stronghold with 5,000 soldiers and rescued 30 prisoners by yourself. My unit was busy elsewhere. Someone had to do it. You destroyed an entire terrorist network in South America using only local resources and no backup. The locals wanted their freedom. I just showed them how to take it. Lieutenant Foster was reading over Captain Rodriguez's shoulder. This one says you coordinated simultaneous operations on 3 different continents, managing resistance fighters in 12 different countries. Modern communications make a lot of things possible. General Hayes leaned back in her chair. Colonel Morrison, these reports read like fiction, like superhero stories. They read like the work of someone who had the best training, the best equipment, and the best men in the world? Jake replied. None of it was magic. It was just hard work and good planning. And incredible skill, Captain Rodriguez added. Jake shrugged. Maybe, but skill does not matter if you cannot live with the consequences of using it. The room fell silent again. General Hayes studied Jake's face for a long time. What happened after Kandahar? She asked. I spent 6 months in a military hospital. Doctors, psychiatrists, medications. Nothing helped. I could not sleep, could not eat, could not think about anything except my dead friends. Jake's voice was barely a whisper now. Finally, some very important people decided that the ghost of Kandahar needed to disappear. It gave me a new identity, a pension, and a job here at the Pentagon. Told me to start over. And you became a janitor, Lieutenant Foster said. I became invisible. It was all I wanted. General Hayes stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was fully up now, and people were starting to arrive for work. The aliens want to meet with the ghost, she said without turning around. They think he represents the best of humanity. Then they are wrong, Jake said. The ghost was a killer. A man who sent good people to die for questionable causes. If that is the best humanity has to offer, then maybe we deserve to be left alone. Or maybe, General Hayes turned back to face him. The ghost was a man who carried impossible burdens and made impossible choices so that others could live in peace. She sat back down and looked directly into Jake's eyes. Colonel Morrison, I am going to ask you to do something very difficult. I am going to ask you to be the ghost one more time. Not for the military, not for the government, but for humanity. Jake felt something stirring inside him. Something he had buried 20 years ago. I do not know if I can, he said. The aliens are not asking for a perfect soldier, General Hayes said. They are asking for someone who understands the cost of leadership, someone who has faced failure and learned from it. How do you know what they want? Because they chose you. Out of all the military leaders in human history, they specifically asked for the ghost of Kandahar. That has to mean something. Jake looked at the photograph on the table. 12 young men, all of them dead now, except for him. If I do this, he said slowly, I do it my way. No uniform, no rank, no pretending to be something I am not anymore. I meet them as Jake Morrison, janitor. Agreed, General Hayes said immediately. And after it is over, I go back to my life. No parades, no medals, no recognition. I disappear. Again, if that is what you want. Jake picked up the photograph and stared at it for a moment. Then he looked up at General Hayes. When do we meet the aliens? The alien ship hung in the sky above Earth, like a silver star. It was bigger than anything humans had ever built, but somehow it looked peaceful rather than threatening. Jake stared up at it through the window of the transport helicopter and tried to calm his racing heart. First time meeting aliens? Captain Rodriguez asked. He was sitting across from Jake, trying to make conversation. First time doing anything like this in 20 years, Jake replied. General Hayes sat next to him, reviewing files on her tablet. The ship will transport you up using some kind of beam technology. Our scientists do not understand how it works, but they say it is safe. How do you know it is safe? Jake asked. Because they could have destroyed us already if they wanted. 2, Lieutenant Foster pointed out from her seat near the pilot. The fact that we are still here means they want to talk. The helicopter landed at a military base outside Washington. In the center of the base was a large circle marked on the ground. Scientists and soldiers stood around it, all looking up at the alien ship. A beam of soft blue light came down from the ship and touched the circle. It was beautiful, like sunlight through water. That is your ride, General Hayes said. Jake took a deep breath, and walked toward the circle. The closer he got, the more nervous he became. Not because of the aliens, but because of what they expected him to be. The ghost of Kandahar had been a legend, a myth, someone who could do impossible things. Jake Morrison was just a janitor who had not made an important decision in 20 years. "Colonel Morrison," General Hayes called out. Jake stopped and turned back. "Good luck," she said. Then she saluted him. Jake nodded and stepped into the circle of light. The world disappeared. When his vision cleared, Jake was standing in a room that looked like nothing he had ever seen. The walls seemed to be made of liquid metal that shifted and flowed like water. Soft light came from everywhere and nowhere. The air smelled like flowers and rain. "Welcome, ghost of Kandahar." Jake turned toward the voice. Standing before him was a being that was definitely not human, but somehow not frightening either. It was tall and thin, with skin that changed color like an oil slick. Its eyes were large and dark, full of intelligence. "I am High Command Zenth, of the Dominion Coalition," the being said. Its voice came from somewhere around Jake, not from its mouth. "We have waited long to meet you." "I am Jake Morrison," Jake replied. "I used to be the ghost, but that was a long time ago." "Time means little when speaking of legends," Zenth said. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." Chairs appeared from the floor, molding themselves into shapes that perfectly fit both Jake and the alien. Jake sat down carefully. "Your people are in danger," Zenth said without any introduction. "There are species in this galaxy that see young civilizations as threats to be eliminated. The Dominion Coalition exists to protect worlds like yours. What do you want in return?" Jake asked. Zenth's skin shifted to a lighter color, which Jake somehow understood meant approval. "You ask the right questions. Most leaders we meet want to know about the benefits first. You want to know the cost. Everything has a cost. Indeed. We want humanity to join the coalition, but not as junior members. We want you to help lead it." Jake was quiet for a moment. "Why us? We have barely figured out space travel." "There must be older, wiser species you could choose." "Wisdom is not measured in years," Zenth replied. "We have studied your species for some time. You have a quality that is rare in the galaxy." "What quality?" "You learn from failure. You grow from pain. You become stronger, not despite your weakness, but because of it." Zenth gestured, and images appeared in the air between them. Jake saw battles from his past, missions he had led, decisions he had made. Most species, when they gain power, use it to dominate others. Humans do something different. You use power to protect those who cannot protect themselves. "Not always," Jake said quietly. "I have made decisions that got good people killed. Yes, we know about Kandahar." The images changed, showing Jake's last mission. He watched his men die again, felt the weight of command crushing him all over again. "Tell me what you learned from that failure," Zenth said. Jake was quiet for a long time. He had never really thought about what he had learned, only about what he had lost. "I learned that being in charge means living with the consequences of your choices," he said finally. "Not just the good consequences, but the bad ones too. And I learned that sometimes the best choice is still a terrible choice. And you have to make it anyway, because not choosing is worse." "What else?" Jake thought harder. "I learned that the people who follow you trust you with their lives. That trust is the most precious thing in the universe, and you have to earn it every day." Zenth's skin shifted to a warm golden color. "These are the lessons that make great leaders, not the victories, but the defeats. Not the success, but the failure." "I am not a great leader," Jake said. "I ran away. I hid for 20 years. You chose to step away from power when you realized you were not ready to use it wisely. How many leaders have that kind of wisdom? Jake had never thought of it that way before. The Dominion Coalition needs leaders who understand that power exists to serve others, not the self, Zenth continued. We need people who have been broken and rebuilt themselves into something stronger. What exactly are you asking me to do? Help us create a new kind of galactic community, one based on protection rather than conquest, one where the strong defend the weak instead of destroying them. Zenth gestured again, and Jake saw images of dozens of different worlds. Some were beautiful beyond imagination. Others were burned and lifeless. The universe is full of species that believe might makes right. They destroy anything they see as competition. We in the Coalition believe something different. What do you believe? That diversity makes us stronger. That every species has something unique to offer. That the purpose of civilization is to help others become the best version of themselves. Jake looked at the images floating around him. So many different worlds, so many different forms of life. Why do you think humans can help with this? Because you have already done it on your own world. You have hundreds of different cultures, languages, beliefs. Instead of destroying each other, you have learned to work together. We still fight. Wars, Jake pointed out. But you also have doctors who travel to foreign countries to heal strangers. Teachers who dedicate their lives to educating children who are not their own. Soldiers who die protecting people they have never met. Zenth stood up and walked to what looked like a window. Outside, Jake could see Earth spinning slowly below them. Your species does something remarkable, Zenth said. When you see suffering, your first instinct is to help. When you see injustice, you fight it. When you see someone weaker than yourself, you protect them. Not everyone is like that. No, but enough of you are, and that is what gives us hope. Jake joined Zenth at the window. Earth looked so small from up here, so fragile. What would you need from us? Jake asked. Your world would become a sanctuary within the Coalition. A place where species who have been hurt by the wars can come to heal. Your people would help them recover, help them rebuild. And in return? Protection, technology, knowledge of the galaxy, and the chance to help shape a better future for everyone. Jake thought about his men who had died in Kandahar. They had believed they were fighting for something important, something bigger than themselves. There is something you should know, Jake said. I am not the man I used to be. The ghost of Kandahar was confident, decisive, unafraid. I am just a janitor now. You are the same man, Zenth replied. You have just learned the value of humility. I do not know if I can lead anyone anymore. Leadership is not about being fearless. It is about doing what is right, even when you are afraid. Jake stared down at Earth for a long time. Somewhere down there, General Hayes and her team were waiting for his answer. Somewhere down there, billions of people were going about their lives, unaware that their future hung in the balance. If I agree to this, Jake said slowly, I have conditions. Name them. Earth's role in the Coalition is to heal, not to fight. We help the wounded, not create more wounds. Agreed. We do this our way. No species gets to tell us how to run our world. Agreed. And if we ever decide this is not working, we can leave. No punishment, no retaliation. Zenth was quiet for a moment. That condition is ... unusual. Most species, once they join the Coalition, never want to leave. Most species have not spent 20 years learning to walk away from power when necessary. Zenth's skin shifted to that golden color again. Agreed. All your conditions are accepted. Jake took a deep breath. Then humanity accepts membership. In the Dominion Coalition. Excellent. There is one more thing. What? The Coalition needs a human representative. Someone to speak for your species in our councils. Someone to help guide our policies. Jake shook his head. I told you, I am not that person anymore. I am just a janitor. You are whoever you choose to be, Zenth said. But the coalition needs someone who understands both power and restraint. Someone who has commanded and someone who has served. Jake thought about his 15 years of cleaning floors, emptying trash, being invisible. Maybe those years had taught him something after all. I will think about it, he said. That is all we ask. The blue light surrounded Jake again, and suddenly, he was back on Earth, standing in the... 6 months later, Jake Morrison was still pushing a cleaning cart through the Pentagon halls. But everything else had changed. The building now housed the Earth Embassy for the Dominion Coalition. Beings from 12 different species worked alongside. Humans in offices that had been redesigned to accommodate different body types and environmental needs. The hallways hummed with translation devices converting dozens of languages into something everyone could understand. Jake had watched it all happen, one day at a time. First came the construction crews, modifying rooms and installing new technology. Then came the diplomats, both human and alien, setting up the systems that would govern Earth's role in the coalition. But the most important arrivals were the refugees. They came in small groups at first, survivors of wars that had destroyed their home worlds. Beings who had lost everything and everyone they loved. They arrived scared, broken, barely alive. Jake met them all. It started by accident. He was cleaning the medical wing late one night when he heard crying coming from one of the rooms. Inside, he found a young being that looked almost human, except for the blue-tinted skin and forearms. She was no more than a child, curled up on the bed and shaking with fear. Hey, Jake said softly, setting down his mop. Are you okay? The child looked up at him with large, dark eyes. She said something in a language Jake did not recognize, but he understood the tone. She was terrified. Jake sat down in the chair next to her bed. He did not try to touch her or get too close. He just sat there, quiet and calm. My name is Jake, he said. I work here. I clean things. The child watched him carefully. After a few minutes, she stopped crying. That is better, Jake said with a smile. Crying is okay sometimes, but it does not solve problems. Want to know what does solve problems? The child tilted her head, curious, taking things one step at a time, one day at a time, one moment at a time. Jake did not know if she understood his words, but she seemed to understand his voice. She lay back down and closed her eyes. The next night, Jake brought a small toy he had bought on his way to work. Nothing fancy, just a little stuffed bear. He left it on her nightstand without saying anything. The night after that, the toy was gone. But the child was sitting up in bed, holding it, and when she saw Jake, she smiled. Word spread quickly through the embassy. The janitor who was good with the refugees. The quiet man who could calm the frightened ones, who could make the angry ones laugh, who somehow always knew what each person needed. Dr. Helen Adams, the embassy's chief medical officer, stopped Jake in the hallway one evening. I do not know what you are doing with our patients, she said, but keep doing it. The recovery rates in the rooms you visit are 3 times higher than anywhere else. I am just cleaning, Jake replied. No, you are not. You are healing. How? Jake thought about it. I listen. Most of these people have been through terrible things. They do not need someone to fix them. They need someone to see them as more than just their pain. Dr. Adams nodded slowly. Have you ever considered a career change? We could use someone like you in the medical department. I like my job, Jake said. It lets me meet everyone without making them feel like they have to perform or impress anyone. I am just the janitor. I am safe. As the months passed, Jake became something of a legend among the refugees. They called him different names in different languages, but they all meant the same thing. The friend, the helper, the one who cares. Hayes noticed too. She started asking Jake to attend briefings about new arrivals, getting his thoughts on how to help them adjust. His insights were always simple but effective. "This species comes from a world with no sunlight," Jake would say. "Maybe put them in the basement levels where it is darker." Or, "These people are used to living in groups. Do not put them in single rooms. They will think we are punishing them." One day, Captain Rodriguez found Jake in the cafeteria, sitting with a group of refugees and teaching them to play cards. The beings were all different species, but they were laughing together like old friends. "How do you do it?" Rodriguez asked later. "How do you connect with them so easily?" Jake shrugged. "I know what it feels like to be broken. I know what it feels like to lose everything and have to start over. When you have been there yourself, it is easier to help others find their way." "Is that why you refused the promotion offers?" Jake had been offered dozens of positions over the past 6 months. Ambassador, Cultural Liaison, Director of Refugee Services. He had turned them all down. "Power changes people," Jake said. "The moment I accept a title, I stop being someone these refugees can trust. I become part of the system instead of part of their healing." The biggest test came when High Command Zenth returned to Earth for an inspection. Jake was cleaning the main conference room when the alien leader arrived with a delegation from the Coalition. "Jake Morrison," Zenth said, recognizing him immediately. "We meet again." "Sir," Jake replied, continuing to wipe down the table. "I have heard interesting reports about your work here." "Just doing my job, sir." Zenth's skin shifted to that golden color Jake remembered. "Your job, as you call it, has become legendary throughout the Coalition. Other sanctuary worlds are asking for their own Jakes." Jake stopped cleaning and looked up. "What do you mean?" "Refugee recovery rates on Earth are unprecedented. Beings who have not spoken in years are talking again. Trauma that should take decades to heal is resolving in months. The medical staff is calling it a miracle. It is not a miracle. It is just people helping people." "Exactly. Which is why I must ask again, will you consider a formal position in the Coalition? We need someone to teach other worlds how to do what Earth is doing." Jake thought about all the refugees he had met. The child with 4 arms, who now helped other frightened children. The warrior species who had put down their weapons and learned to garden. The scientists who had lost their home world but found new purpose helping Earth develop better medical technology. "I will consider it," Jake said, "but I have conditions." "Name them." "I keep my janitor job. I keep cleaning these halls. That is how I meet people, how I understand what they need." "Agreed." "And I do not take a title or rank. I am just Jake, the guy who cleans things and listens to problems." "Also agreed." "What else?" "I want to train other people to do this work, not officials or diplomats, regular people. Maintenance workers, cooks, security guards. The ones the refugees will trust because they are not trying to impress anyone." Zenth was quiet for a moment. "You want to create an army of janitors?" "I want to create a network of friends. This is ... unusual. But if it works ... it will work, because it is already working." 3 months later, Jake stood in a conference room filled with beings from 20 different species. They were all support staff from various Coalition worlds, maintenance workers, food service employees, transport operators. The people who kept things running while the important folks had meetings. "My name is Jake Morrison," he said to the group. "I am a janitor, and I am here to teach you the most important skill in the galaxy." A being that looked like a walking tree raised what might have been a hand. "What skill is that?" "How to see people instead of problems." Jake spent the next week teaching them what he had learned. how to listen without trying to fix, how to be present without being intrusive, how to offer help without making people feel helpless. The secret, he told them on the last day, is remembering that everyone is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Your job is not to win their battle for them. Your job is to remind them that they are not fighting alone. When the training was over, each being returned to their home world with new skills and a new understanding. Within months, refugee recovery rates across the coalition began to improve. Jake returned to his normal routine at the Pentagon, cleaning floors, emptying trash, and talking to anyone who needed a friend. But now, he also traveled once a month to other worlds, teaching his simple approach to healing. He never accepted a formal title. His business cards, when he bothered to carry them, simply said, Jake Morrison, janitor. One evening, as Jake was finishing his shift, he found General Hayes waiting by his locker. I wanted to thank you, she said. For what? For showing us that the most important work is often the work nobody notices. Jake smiled. Someone has to take out the trash. It is more than that, and you know it. General Hayes pulled out an official-looking document. The Coalition Council wants to give you a medal, the highest honor they have. Jake shook his head. I do not want a medal. I told them you would say that. So they are doing something else instead. What? They are establishing the Morrison Protocol, a new standard for refugee care based on your methods. Every sanctuary world in the coalition will follow it. Jake was quiet for a moment. Will it help people? It already is. Then I guess that is worth more than any medal. As Jake walked to his truck that night, he thought about how much his life had changed. 6 months ago, he had been invisible, forgotten, just another face in the crowd. Now he was still invisible to most people. Still just a janitor pushing a cleaning cart through the halls. But he had learned something important. Being nobody special was exactly what made him useful. The refugees trusted him because he was not trying to be important. The coalition respected him because he got results without needing credit. And Jake himself had finally found peace be